There are multiple approaches that the Marlins can take at this year's trade deadline, and Joe Frisaro and I are going to battle it out on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. I've been a diehard fan of the Marlins since I was 12 years old, and I've podcasted about the team for the last 4 seasons. Go hit me up on X at Jeremiah Geiger 2. And thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And welcoming back into the show is the great Joe Frisaro. Joe, how are we doing, my friend?
Doing great, Jeremiah. And who thought that we'd be approaching a trade deadline about to talk about what we're about to talk about? But looking forward to it. It should be a lively and fun little discussion.
It's going to be really fun. So the Marlins right now, I never thought I would say this, but they're in wild card contention. It's hard to argue that sitting on the outside looking in, that it's inconceivable that they just fall out of it completely. That could happen, but they could also go on a magical run. And the funny thing is, we're sitting here 8 days away from the trade deadline. Every game matters for the Marlins, and every game matters for the standings. And as Marlins fans, this is fun. I love winning. I love watching the Marlins play competitive baseball. They've started the second half winning back-to-back series, and suddenly they're just 6.5 games out of the wild card as we record this.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you note, I'm the last person, based on my feelings of where the organization directionally is, but the trend line is the reason why I'm going to say what I'm about to say. They should be leaning more buy than sell, because they're trending as well as any team, if not better than pretty much every team in baseball. And I don't care if they're 5 under, whatever it is, 6.5 out. Yeah, normally that is a sign that it's going the other way. But when you look at it, 2 teams in front of them are going to sell. Arizona's going to sell, and St. Louis is going to sell. So they're immediately, not going for it. Doesn't mean that those 2 teams can't do the same thing as the Marlins to get a magical run and still somehow get there. But it's hard to imagine Arizona, if they trade Suarez, Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and Naylor, that they're going to be in it. St. Louis is already going in the wrong direction. They're thinking of going, selling. So that kind of leaves Cincinnati, which is, I believe, a catchable team, not a team I see going on a tremendous run. They could hang around close. And then it leads to who is the team. Is it improbable? But the team the Marlins just took 2 of 3 from, and you can see this is not a powerhouse San Diego Padre team. They can catch 6.5 games. They can catch that. And if they don't, if the Marlins punt, then the playoffs are going to come down to Cincinnati's going to be the only team in that race. And it's going to be Cincinnati as a chance waiting for, and I've seen enough baseball and know how August and September are, where it becomes a war of attrition, that it's very conceivable. The Padres play a lot of very close games. They're in they're in the toughest division in baseball, in the NL West. That bullpen's used all the time. And the Marlins right now don't need bullpen help, but everybody else does. And if the Marlins get Weathers back, even if he's, only available for 5 to 6 starts, well, some other guys are going to invariably be wearing out. That those 5 or 6 starts might be enough to get you there. Norby can come back. I take it from a different point of view as well. I personally don't think their farm system's very good. I mean, I don't think it's terrible. It's certainly not great. So there are no untouchables there. And if the Marlins are good, we have the Thomas Whites that you could build a case for that you don't really want to move, but they don't have any untouchables. And they're also not going to have to trade for bullpen. they'd have to give up something for a bat. But if you move Sandy and or Edward Cabrera, then August and September are going to be Marlin fans will be one of the Dolphins doing when the Canes get going.
Right.
And it's already we're turning the page, and then you're just going to let these players. Normally, if you to become a buyer, in all the years I've covered the Marlins, which is longer than pretty much anybody has in the history of the franchise, is when the team gives you a reason. It's not like, oh, just look, they're 5 under and they're 6.5 out. But when a team performs at a level, and they've been 10 to 11-ish over 500 over a 6 or so week span. I go back to 2003 when they were 10 under in late May, end up being, 91, 71, 20 over. Now, granted, it's a different situation. They had they had made up the ground already by this time, but we also have that extra wild card. And if I'm Bruce Sherman, let's put it this way. I'll say this because I do have some inside info. They are considering selling. They are completely all in on selling. The directives are to sell. So what I'm saying is not, speaking ignorantly or just throwing a pie in the sky thing. But my message here is probably to a guy who's not very happy with me. It's to Bruce Sherman, because he could override Peter Bendix. He could, and the other investors can sit around and go, you know what? And I, we kind of went back and forth a bit about the attendance thing over the weekend. But if it's a real 15,000 at noon on a Wednesday for what could be Sandy's last start, your market's kind of waking up to you a little bit. So if you want to put 15 to 20 and see what, maybe you get close to 30,000 in the stadium playing meaningful games in September, which is revenue, which this organization greatly needs, and a signal to the market to say, buy tickets in 2026, because I get the emails, and they were coming out with just a little bit of winning. They were shooting out emails for season tickets. You could tell Peter, we're not trading Sandy, we're not trading Edward, and we're going to add something, and we'll play along the ways of, whether Cal Contra, they really don't have a lot to sell anyway. They're not like an Arizona situation where you got a guy hit with 35 homers and a team that, is 2 under in Arizona. And what do? You kind of have to seize that and see.
Right, but here's the other aspect of it. If here's the thing though. If you go all in on buying and it doesn't, then you're going back to where they were 2 years ago. Because here's the thing. After the 23 season, and they bought, and it was great. They should have bought, and they did. They went for it. They made the playoffs. They didn't do anything to upgrade the roster. Everything stayed the same. The farm system was gone. And you went back to square one when you start off 6-24, and yet another teardown happened. What I don't want to see is the Marlins go all in on the deadline, because there's still major holes on this roster, and there is a plan in place for young guys through the farm system. For example, Jesus Sanchez gets traded. Jacob Marcy is major league ready. I think he deserves a call. He takes Sanchez's spot.
You trade close to the playoffs next year?
Possibly, but I don't know. I think it's a kind of a lateral effect with Sanchez and Marcy. What I'm with is the pitching staff, because I don't think the Marlins should trade Sandy right now. I know he had a great start, and we're going to talk about him coming up next. But all this time, the last month or two, I've been saying if Sandy doesn't continue to pitch well, and he hasn't the majority of the season except for today, which was awesome, then why move him and settle for a low return? Cabrera is the X factor for me. Cabrera is really the X factor. Do you move Edward Cabrera right now at his highest value, or do you keep him and semi-build around him and Yuri in 26? Because that is a realistic option that not a lot of other fans are talking about. But what I really don't want to see is two things. The Marlins don't get major league ready guys if they sell, guys that can help sooner rather than later, and also just go all in for a rental. Because like Thomas White, I want to ask you this. Would you trade Thomas White in a 1-for-1 swap for Eugenio Suarez?
I'd listen and consider it. People,
See,
I know that the cult will say that's stupid and whatever, but that's the number one guy in the market. But and I'm not convinced Thomas White's going to be great anyway. But it's probably the evaluation thing, and I don't think he's going to be ready next year, and who knows? So, he's everyone acts like he's an ace or whatever, but I don't think he necessarily is. So it's the evaluation of that player. But okay, so let's say you don't. Let's say not that pie in the sky or that big of a move, but you can trade a controllable pitcher or a prospect pitcher for a big bad first baseman. There are guys out there you can do that with. You also can trade for controllable players.
that's what I'm saying.
You also could do something like two players in a trade. They're just not thinking that way. So the more they go, the less likely this is that they'll just stay the course. And then, then next year, okay, so the last 2 months, they kind of go 15 under by the end of the year. They wasted, whatever momentum they had. And then they're banking on, like you say, whether you think of, a Morrissey or whoever, or Griffin Conine comes back or whoever, that's automatically going to give the same production. You have to kind of, again, it's trend lines and what you really have. And when is the window? To me, the window is now. Not necessarily to go all in and win in 25 and 20, but to think that 27, which is really this math of 70 wins this year, 80 wins next year, 90 wins year after, is complete ludicrous in fantasy. The Baltimore Orioles thought they were going to. You don't just automatically do that. You don't know what any of these players are going to look like in 2 years.
No, you don't know, but at the same time, what you're building towards, you're seeing progress from Peter Bendix. There is more talent in the last calendar year that's been added. The Kyle Stowers deal. They traded Trevor Rogers and got a piece.
What if Stowers reverts and it has 20 homers next year, not 30 to 40?
It could happen, but that's just everything.
Sophomore slump. But that's kind of how these things go. So just, Baltimore thought that they were on their way to dethroning, controlling the East forever.
But they never spent. Terrible. They never spent in pitching.
Well, that's the thing. No matter what formula that you not you specifically, but the market thinks can give them the math that'll get them automatically 70, 80, 90 wins, ain't happening without spending.
Right, and I've advocated this team needs to spend.
Then they're going to have to, and I'm standing by it. If Stowers is a top 5 MVP type guy, which he has a chance of being this year, with a high WAR and 35 bombs, and he backs that up next year, that ARB number is going to be high. It ain't going to be 6 million or whatever. That's going to be closer to 20. It's going to be 15 to 20 because already the projections from trade rumors for the highest first-year guy in the 26 class is Contreras at 12 million. That number is going to be 15 million and north. If you never really know how it's going to settle, and the trade rumors thing isn't always right. Sometimes it's way off. So then, if you want to say we're going to build around Kyle, well, you have to.
Him. Well, he's not a free agent until 2030, though. I see your point with the ARB. I do.
The ARB's going to be really high. And all these guys are going to hit on. That's the other thing, because this is what happened to the 06 Marlins when they broke up the 05 team. They went young. They weren't supposed to be any good, and they were like 20 under and actually went over 500 in September before Josh Johnson got hurt, and they ended up finishing just a tick under 500, and everyone just assumed it was going to skyrocket. And then in 07, every pitcher they had got hurt, and they stunk. And then 28 came. They actually had winning seasons in 08 and 09, but they all hit arbitration at the same time, and their salaries all just ballooned up. So Willingham had to go. They were trying to sign Ugla at one point, but he didn't want what they were offering, so he went. Hanley's the guy they ended up committing to. They traded Miguel Cabrera. After 05 or 06, 06 was, I think, Miggy's last year, if I remember correctly. But point being is, it's a dangerous game Bendix is playing if he just thinks he's just going to stay and everything's just going to ride. Because the worst thing, like, let's say they don't do anything and this team wins 80 games. with all these guys like having great years. They're all, first of all, not making the playoffs with 80 wins. And then all these guys have just raised that, and they're getting shitty draft pick. Oops, I'm not sure.
I gotta cut you off. We gotta hit the ad real quick. And after the ad break, we're gonna continue this buy and sell discussion because there's a lot of variables with it. So stick with us, and we'll be back right after this. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. One of the things it comes to spending for me is I love spending on baseball memorabilia, on a new hat, a new shirt, and it adds up. But with Monarch Money, you don't have to worry about that. It's going to help you. You're going to budget smarter and save more money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Back here with the great Joe Frisaro, we're discussing the Marlins' approach to this deadline. Now, you want them to buy. I think they should do a hybrid sell and buy, a mixture of both, so to speak, because I do believe what Peter Bendix is doing as a general manager, we're seeing tangible results from. We're seeing progress. We have Agustin Ramirez, Kyle Stowers. Those are two winning trades for this franchise. Thomas White, I think he's one of the best left-handers in minor league baseball. I don't think you move him for a rental. And I still believe the optimist in me wants the Marlins to make the playoffs. But if I'm a realist, I'm also saying there's a huge risk with going all in for it. Because if it doesn't pan out, then you're back to where it all started. But I did a mock trade episode yesterday. And one of the trades I had up was possibly sending Edward Cabrera, to the Cubs. I love the Cubs farm system, and I love the Boston Red Sox farm system. Chicago has a guy, Owen Casey. He's major league ready. He's blocked right now in Chicago. You trade for Casey, you have a player that's playing every day on your big league roster, much like Stowers was last year. Jackson Wiggins, another really good prospect. I would be okay with the Marlins dealing Cabrera now if they feel that they can get the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything in between in terms of a prospect haul. It has to be an overpay to consider moving him. You can't settle for an Edward Cabrera trade, much like you can't settle for a Sandy Alcantara trade. But if they manage to pull that off, Joe, I think that's a defendable decision to quote unquote sell because of the talent you're receiving back, and this team needs talent.
So on the flip side of that, let's say the Cubs don't want to part with a prospect you think is or an overpay. They could go give less for a rental in Zach Allen.
That's true. Then at that point, you go to the other markets. You see, okay, will the Red Sox do it? Some team is going to pay. There's aggressive GMs out there. Look at Preller with the Padres. Preller's done it for years.
There's also a lot of GMs who are, the analytics who are risk averse, and they're going to sit around. They do very minimal trades, and they're going to run to the finish line with kind of what they have. So then what? If the Marlins, if you're going to be stuck with Cabrera and Sandy because you're going to get the haul, then what's the second half going to be? They might as well go get somebody and make a run at it.
I see that because you don't want to trade them for less. But if you do keep them, and there's really not a lot of pieces around those two to move. You'd probably trade Bender. You'd listen on Ronnie Enriquez. You just take calls. See what happens.
If you get rid of
Jesus Sanchez.
That's another reason I wouldn't necessarily look to sell, because the pieces you're saying, everyone's looking for bullpen help. The Marlins have had the best bullpen for a month and a half.
Then that's where you get talent from.
But that's punting the season. See, no matter what you say, you could do the soft sell buy thing. The season's gone anyway, so might as well just do a full sell.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is, besides Cabrera and Sandy, the pieces that the Marlins have, apart from the bullpen and Sanchez, those are the pieces you're trading. I don't think the Marlins are sitting there looking to trade Otto Lopez. And Kyle Stowers, a month ago, I heard people trade Kyle Stowers. And I said, what are we doing? This is somebody you build around. You can't
and
trade
the funny
everybody
thing
with
is,
talent.
the funny thing is, though, when you look at the long range plan, is, and I'll give you credit because you're like the first person and the only one that really was talking up Kyle Stowers. Everybody else was ready to send him down to this or that. I'll tell you this much: the Marlins now, they want to build around Stowers. They weren't talking. Peter Bendis wasn't talking about Kyle Stowers as the face of the franchise, internally or publicly. So he shocked them. So the
Yeah, I
question
mean,
then
he
is,
shocked everyone.
what's really their opinion of him? Are they really all in on him? They were touting Connor Norby as the face of the franchise. So it just shows players. That's the thing. It's about players. It's not about the genius of a GM or genius of this, that, the other thing. It's about the players ultimately. So these players right now are motivated, playing together collectively. You take anything out of there unless you're just moving out to move in. You get a situation again. It's like this. It's not like the Marlins go to the playoffs every year, so you can sit around and say, you know what, we'll kind of do this, that, and the other thing. Whatever also makes kind of the stars line up is the Braves are down. When are the Braves? How
Let
long
me
are the
let
Braves
me
going to be
pose
down?
a question to you,
So
just a hypothetical for this deadline. Let's assume that Cabrera and Sandy, for whatever reason, Sandy stays because this start isn't enough to move him, and Bendix makes the smart decision, doesn't sell him low, and they trade Cabrera for that package I said about the Cubs, like Casey, Jackson Wiggins, Jefferson Rojas. Just they get a really good, talented return for Cabrera. So that's step one. Step two, you have Anthony Bender, Jesus Sanchez. Those two get moved for prospects. Marcy comes up, replaces Sanchez in right, who's a true center fielder, I think. He could play center, but real great season in AAA. You're not really experiencing a huge drop-off. The bullpen, yes, you're without Bender, and maybe you move Cal Quantrill, who's on an expiring deal. You keep Stowers. Sandy, you don't sell low, and you got a huge haul for Edward Cabrera and maybe packaging, Lake Bach or something. To me, that's a win because the majority of your core is still in place.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you're adding pieces and such. You're going to finish with 72 wins, 73 wins, whatever, which if that makes people happy, then you're going to be all excited about next year. But the problem is if you don't sell Sandy or move Sandy, if you're not committed to him, he's got, well, I think it's 18 million next year with a 3 million club option,
Yeah.
to basically not avoid paying them because they're not going to pay him that big money in 27. So they're eating 21 million, which means it's good, which will greatly affect any extensions they're talking about. I'm sure they probably just want Sandy's salary out of here. So that's going to affect his return. So it's like when you talk the return is the other team's paying the whole money. Unless the Marlins want to pay, half of Sandy's salary, which I can't imagine they would want to. But so the Sandy trade may not bring the return that you're looking for. And if he stays and you're not committed to going to the playoffs and you're not really selling any more season tickets than normal and you're not getting any, extra revenue anywhere, you're kind of hamstringing yourself for any extensions. So you could say, okay, well, they're still controllable. We don't have to extend any of these guys. Well, normally, if you want to be, I remember when Stanton was, we're going to build around Stanton. At the time, Stanton's like, I'm not signed. Like, privately, it's like telling you, yeah, I'm kind of wearing it, but no one's full time committed to me, So you don't really feel like it's your team to be a building block other than just on the field in terms of production. But in terms of your stature within the organization in the clubhouse and how much you could speak up, even as a leader, you kind of feel like, I'm not sure they're really committed to me. So
I mean, it's hard to
kind of
imagine the Marlins are committed to Sandy right now because of the position they're in. And going into the season, I still think, Joe, this Marlins team needs talent. It's been a really fun last month
they're
and a half.
talented. There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
And that's
there's no
why I'm
guarantee. There's
advocating
no
to
guarantee.
do a soft sell.
August 1st, they could, it could all
They could be
fall
10
apart as
under.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the risk you take. Do you
But
want to
wouldn't you want to capitalize? Yeah.
But then, I guarantee you we'll have a similar conversation next year, because it's just an organizational thing that you're constantly banking on overproduction for guys not making a ton of money. I mean, that's still the blueprint. That's still why this isn't resonating. And that's, again, it's like, why did I want to kind of make at least an effort in 2024? Well, you went to the playoffs in 23.
Yeah, we agree on that.
Why do you? Yeah, so why? But then you sit around, you just smear Kim. You act like the 100 losses never happened, or if they did, it wasn't Peter's fault. And then they kind of whitewash that season. We got the usual suspects out there saying all the right things to say the things to create the narrative, and now everyone's carrying the weight of Peter. Sell. There's the odds are predictability. All this stuff, which all has some layers of validity, but they're still the same old Marlins. And it's there's going to be regression likely. There's going to be are they at what point, when the window is what presents itself, and it's usually when your pitching's ready. It's not just automatically 27, 28, 29, we're going to be great, because I'll tell you, the last year's draft was not really very good, the 24 draft. And the 25 draft is, I do like the first rounder, but just kind of collectively, it seems like it's an okay, not great draft. So, and they're kind of looking to build with kind of pieces that fit more. Like it's like these players that they're taking are assigned role players. They'll get a guy who's a 2-pitch high strikeout reliever profile. They'll get a hitter who doesn't hit against
the next segment,
lefties.
though. About the plan.
You're not getting really complete players. Not really developing complete players. They're developing situational players to be replaced in this system, which is probably my biggest reason why I'm not a believer in this plan long term and sustainable, because I just I think that you kind of have to. I think most teams you have windows, and when the opportunity presents itself, you can sit around and criticize signing somebody or something not working out. Well, I'll respect the team that goes for it, because I want the big league. I could care less about the war of somebody in low A ball. In 2 years after the new CBA, there's probably going to be one less level of minor leagues anyway. So it's like if the owners get their way, so it's like I'm not for kicking the can down the road and we'll be good in 27. Like, wait a minute. You don't know what's going to happen with Stowers. You don't know what injuries are going to happen.
Well, let's talk about this plan.
Arizona wasn't thinking every player that they counted on being hurt. So that could easily happen in 26 or 22 in Miami, in 27 in Miami.
Coming up next, we're going to talk about the plan. We're going to debate the plan, because you don't think it will work. I see a vision in what they're doing, and it hasn't been perfect, but we're going to discuss, will this plan work? Is there a plan in place? That's coming up right after this. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency like a burst pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? Nope, you called the next one. And that's why having a reliable business line is so important, and that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. If you juggled 2 phones to help keep your business and personal calls separate, OpenPhone solves that instantly. And when you're at home spending time with your family and friends, watching some Marlins baseball, the AI agent will handle those after-hours calls, so you're never going to miss something. You're never going to miss a customer ever again. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Marlins listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonmlb. That's openphone.com/lockedonmlb. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Back here with Joe Frisaro talking Marlins deadline and also the plan in place. I appreciate all the everyday listeners out there. And if this is your first time checking out Locked On Marlins, hit that subscribe button. Joe, I think there's a plan in place. I think we're seeing some tangible results from last year to this year. And the evidence for that is as clear as looking at the record and the stats and the behind the success this season. The Marlins right now are 5 games under 500 on July 23rd. A year ago, they were, I don't have the number pulled up, but it was around 30, if not more. It was dismal a season ago. They tore it all down. I don't think the Marlins are going to tear it all down this season. I think what you're seeing is a more talented farm system with players who are on the cusp of making the major leagues. Guys like Joe Mack, Thomas White possibly. You have Jacob Marcy, who we talked about earlier. I think what Peter Bendix is doing is hamstrung because Bruce Sherman refuses to spend money. Because in an ideal world, for me, you're getting talent. You have someone like Stowers who you acquired, Augustine Ramirez, Otto Lopez was a waiver claim. These awesome transactions, and then Bruce Sherman says, all right, open up the pocketbooks and get 1 or 2 really good free agents, not 8-year deals, but 3-4-year deals to supplement the young core. Because what I think the Marlins still have to do is find more talent. Yes, they're a young, hungry, competitive, and talented ball club, but they don't have the talent compared to other teams. So, for example, this offseason, are they going to spend? That's a big question. What moves at this trade deadline can Peter Bendix do to bring in more talent? Maybe the next Kyle Stowers. And that's kind of where I am. I love seeing the results, but there's still work to be done, which is why I'm not all in, go buy, trade the whole farm.
I think a lot they're doing is waiting to see what the CBA in terms of long-term deals, where the finances of the game are. I believe they are firmly wanting to break the union and get a salary cap. I don't think there will be a salary cap. I also don't think there'll be a long work stoppage. There could be a work stoppage, but I don't think they'll be long because I think baseball will not want to see the sport destroyed. And so I think they're going to kind of be frugal in that regard. They may try to sign somebody, one of these, younger guys, controllable guys to an extension or two to see how that goes. I personally don't think I know that others think that Yuri should be their number 1 priority, but he's a pitcher who still, I think he's due for a long time, right? Yuri, in terms of when he's like free agent. Yeah, so pitching, he's already at Tommy John. Yes, he's pitching great, but I'm less wanting to sign a pitcher long term. And I'd kind of ride it out, even if he becomes a really high number. You kind of can budget that for 1 year. If he's a $15 million or $20 million pitcher, I could kind of live with that and not really worry about it, because I got to figure it after 5-6 years. If he's holding up that well, whatever, you trade him if need be, or if you approach, hopefully you're winning and drawing bigger crowds and TV ratings and dollars, and the revenue streams are there that you could, if you wanted and felt confident to do a long term, and then I would do Yuri. I'd keep Yuri, no doubt. It's not, but I don't look at him as that. Stowers is the interesting one, because if I'm Kyle, you look at his age, 27, 28. I would be open, if I were him, to a deal, but not one of my free agent years. I would only be open to a deal that covered my ARB years. And so if you're the Marlins, you're like, okay, he'll make a little more league minimum next year. Hopefully they give him, he was an all-star. If he's good enough, hopefully they incentivize him to whatever minimum is, $1 million, whatever it's close to. But let's say it's 1 million, for 26. But then 27 comes along. Now, first of all, we don't know how this year's going to end, because every day he's getting an extra base hit RBI. He's putting himself into a very unique list. If he's up there as one of the top impactful players in the National League, well, he's going to be paid accordingly. The Marlins almost need him to cool off, but then you don't want that. because you want to see what is he really a guy who has kind of figured out his swing, the zone,
So you
all
would
the
want
metrics and stuff.
Stowers to be extended possibly in the offseason.
If I were the Marlins, I'd probably try to extend them longer. I don't think they would, but if I was Stowers, I wouldn't forfeit a free agent year, because if the Marlins don't want to pay it, someone else will. So if they want to pay me 4 years, 60, yeah, I'll do that, because then you cover my ARB years. I know I'm here at least 4 years. If they fall out of it, if it goes backwards, they could always move me, and I know I'm getting my money.
Do you think
So
that,
if I'm Stowers, so if I'm the Marlins, I'd try to do 5 or 6 years, because then you can kind of spread it out. You could try to get that AAV where you're comfortable. But if I'm
right?
Stowers, I'm like, I'm doing you a favor, and then, because if I'm Stowers, then I'll back on myself, because his salaries are going nothing but up.
Yeah, but what he could also
Howard
do
gets well played.
is just wait for ARB, and he has a good 25, 26. Then, like you said,
Then
he's
he's
going to
gone.
make 15 in ARB.
Yeah, but then he's gone. He won't sign an extension. If he gives up, if he doesn't have an extension by 27, he ain't signing an extension. So you
Unless
got to kind of do it
they
now.
retain him in free agency. What I want to get at
But they'll
though,
have to
Joe,
kind of
is
get at it. He'll have to have the clue that, first of all, the place is where he's comfortable. He wants to stay here. But otherwise, but if I'm the Marlins, I would probably, if I were him, if the Marlins came to him saying they want to talk extension, I'd probably want to do only through my ARB years. For his sake, to not forfeit, years he can make a lot more money than what these guys are probably wanting to pay. But then I'd also want to make sure I'm getting paid to justify, not taking it through ARB. Because what if he does go off? Like I said, that second, third year of ARB could be 25 million. So then the Marlins are running the risk of, oh my goodness, what am I going to be doing here?
I want to keep going, but we're running out of time. So the last topic we'll quickly hit on, quick 30-second answer here for both of us is: do you think Peter Bendix is doing a good job at what he's being asked to do?
I guess you could say yes and no. Obviously this year has been much better. I don't like a 100% analytics approach. I think the draft, that they would have taken Quentin Young and Antonio Jimenez, two guys I think were better than the guys they took, but they went all college because they don't want to spend higher than slot, which those guys would have probably been. The fact that they're in the race, yeah, I mean, you get credit for that. There's a lot of things that are going on internally that point that this is a little bit smoke and mirrors and luck. They don't treat people particularly well as an organization. They certainly don't pay people well. But if I'm a Marlin fan, you're kind of happy that we're not talking about 100-loss season.
Right.
So
you're seeing progress.
So obviously the players have done very well. I think credit goes to many levels, and Peter deserves his share of the credit as well. I'd give him a lot more respect if he kind of went for it and tried to make this year kind of reward what Clayton and what the players are doing by giving them a little bit more to go to battle, and not just make August and September the end of the season where we're just looking at individual numbers and a few exciting games with but you're not going to finish 500, and it's like, okay, whatever, that was fun, but then you're like banking on tomorrow. And I've just seen too many one-hit wonders in 1 year, and that doesn't mean it won't just keep steamrolling ahead in 26. But a lot has been for there. I think their expected record's like 11 under. If you look at run differential,
which
and the expected
makes
stuff,
you wonder, should they
point.
really go all in?
But then again, baseball's a weird sport. It's a magical sport, where you ride the momentum, and that momentum may not be there. You kind of, if it wasn't for the hot streak, and the hot streak being the amount of time it's been, and the fact that nobody in front, like if the Padres were for real, and they bury the Marlins. They won game 1, they sweep the series, and they just kind of, then the Marlins are 9-10 out, and then you just. Then they go ahead thinking about how they're going to either catch LA or fend off San Francisco, and whoever else might kind of get hot, and then play for playoff positioning. But the fact that San Diego lost these 2 games reflects a lot on them. That they're not invincible. They're certainly catchable. And 6.5, I think the Mets were like 7 out in September last year and dethroned Arizona, which won 89 games and stayed home.
It's going to be
So
interesting to see
it's
what the
like,
Fish do. But
no doubt.
we're unfortunately out of time, pushing 40 minutes. They only like me going 30. So, Joe, thank you as always for coming on. It's always awesome to talk on the podcast with you.
All right, Jeremiah. Take care, buddy.
Yep. And that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Marlins. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay locked on, and let's go fish.